say death comes in an instant, but for Niki Lauda, death took its sweet time. 55 agonizing seconds to be exact. Imagine your face cooking like grilled chicken at 800 degrees, your flesh melting off your skull, your lungs are filled with toxic smoke, and the worst part, you're fully conscious through every single second of it. This is the story of how Formula One's coldest, most calculating champion faced the most brutal accident in racing history and somehow crawled out of hell itself to race again just 6 weeks later. By August 1976, Niki Lauda wasn't just winning, he was dominating. The Austrian had secured 61 points in the championship, a massive 45-point lead over his closest rival, the charismatic British playboy James Hunt. But Lauda was different from Hunt in every way. Where Hunt was all charm and recklessness, Lauda was nicknamed the Rat. Not just for his prominent buck teeth, but for his ruthless, calculating approach to racing. He wasn't there to make friends or look good. He was there to win, through meticulous preparation and ice-cold precision. Ferrari's #1 driver had won 4 of the first 6 races that season. His second world championship seemed inevitable. Nothing could stop him, except the Nürburgring. The Nürburgring wasn't just any track. This 14-mile monster winding through Germany's Eifel Mountains was a death trap. Dense forests, narrow corners, virtually no safety equipment. Lauda knew it. He urged his fellow drivers to boycott the race entirely, warning about inadequate fire marshals, missing safety equipment, and the track's notorious reputation. 3 drivers on that grid would be dead within 4 years. Tom Price, Ronnie Peterson, and Patrick Depailler. But when Lauda called for the boycott, he was outvoted. The race would go ahead, and Lauda's worst nightmare was about to come true. Lap 2, August 1st, 1976. Lauda's Ferrari screamed through Bergwerk at nearly 200 kilometers per hour when something went catastrophically wrong. The car swerved violently off the track, smashed into an embankment, and in an instant, transformed into a blazing inferno. Then Brett Lunger's car slammed into the flaming wreckage, pinning Lauda inside. The car was fully fueled. One side was completely sheared off. Flames engulfed everything, and Niki Lauda was trapped. What happened next would be seared into racing history forever. 4 drivers, Arturo Merzario, Brett Lunger, Guy Edwards, and Harold Ertl, rushed to the scene. But Lauda's modified helmet had been knocked off in the impact, leaving his face exposed directly to the flames. Merzario, a former Ferrari driver who knew the car's seatbelt mechanism, dove into the fire himself. Lauda was pushing so hard against the belt, desperate to escape, that Merzario could barely release it. When he finally did, Lauda's body came out like a feather. 55 seconds. That's how long Niki Lauda burned at 800 degrees Celsius. The burns were catastrophic. His face melted. Most of his right ear was gone. His eyelids were destroyed. His scalp was charred to the bone. But worse than the visible damage was what you couldn't see. His lungs were filled with toxic fumes, his blood poisoned by the fire. At the hospital, doctors gave him the last rites. They called a priest. Nobody expected Niki Lauda to survive the night. But Lauda described something even more terrifying than the fire itself. He felt himself falling into a dark hole. Peaceful, almost inviting. This was death calling him, and for a moment, he almost gave in. "It was so nice," he later said. "I just wanted to let go." But then something snapped inside him. The realization hit. This is what dying is. And Niki Lauda, the calculating, ruthless competitor, simply refused to accept it. He forced himself to stay conscious by focusing on every single syllable the doctors spoke. Every single word. Anything to stay away from that hole. The pain was unimaginable. The medical team had to repeatedly insert pumps into his lungs to evacuate the toxic buildup, a procedure so agonizing that most patients begged them to stop. Lauda demanded they do it more. If it had been any other person, they would have died, doctors later said. We'd never seen anything like his determination. Just 33 days later, Niki Lauda walked into the Monza paddock for the Italian Grand Prix. His burns were still fresh, wrapped in bandages. His scarred scalp was barely healed. He couldn't properly close his eyes. Fellow drivers and team members later described him as looking like a ghost. Ferrari team manager Daniele Audetto said, "It was a vision I can never forget in my life. He was so pale, the scars. He'd lost his hair. He could not close his eyes. He was like a ghost." But there was something even more remarkable happening. On the first practice day, Lauda admitted he nearly shit his pants from fear when he shifted into second gear. The terror was overwhelming. Yet by race day, just 42 days after a crash that should have killed him, Niki Lauda finished fourth at Monza. The championship battle with James Hunt came down to the final race in Japan. Torrential rain made the track treacherous. Lauda, his fire-damaged tear ducts causing his eyes to water uncontrollably, pulled into the pits after just 2 laps. He couldn't see. The conditions were too dangerous. Hunt won the championship by a single point. But here's what's truly stunning. Just 1 year later, in 1977, Niki Lauda reclaimed the World Championship. And then, incredibly, he won a 3rd title in 1984, beating his talented teammate Alain Prost by just half a point. Those 55 seconds changed Niki Lauda forever. He would wear his signature red cap for the rest of his life, first to cover the bandages, then to cover the scars. Eventually, sponsors paid him over €1 million just for that cap space, but the accident's effects went deeper than his appearance. His lungs never fully recovered from inhaling those toxic fumes. In 2018, he needed a double lung transplant, and on May 20th, 2019, Niki Lauda passed away at age 70, the crash from 4 decades earlier having finally claimed its victim. When modern driver Romain Grosjean survived his own horrific fiery crash in Bahrain in 2020, the first person he thought of was Niki Lauda. "I thought about Niki Lauda," Grosjean said. "I told myself it wasn't possible to end like that." Lauda's legacy lives on in every safety improvement, every fire-resistant suit, every track marshal properly trained to respond to emergencies. 55 seconds in hell. But Niki Lauda didn't just survive. He came back stronger, won more championships, and proved that sometimes the most brutal crashes can't break the human spirit. As Lauda himself once said, "A race isn't won until it's over." And his race? It wasn't over until he decided it was. If you found this story as incredible as I did, make sure to hit that subscribe button and check out more legendary Formula One stories on the channel. Because sometimes the truth is more dramatic than any Hollywood movie could ever be.